Assalamu alaikum. In this video, you're going to learn a new method that you can use today to learn English in only 6 months or less without studying boring grammar rules or memorizing long word lists. Are you excited? So am I. Let's get down to business. In September 2018, a 33-year-old man named Ilham came to me asking for help. He said, I need to learn English quickly because I'm a programmer and I'm getting job offers from European countries, and the only thing that's holding me back is my English. Can you help? Since I love challenges, I decided to take on this one too, and we began our journey. Ilham was so determined to succeed that he would take classes 25 days a month, while other students would do it only 12 days, and would do just a few things over and over again every single day. As a result, his English began to improve gradually, and he started producing longer and more complex sentences week by week. Eventually, he reached the point where I just could not get him to stop speaking English. He would come to class and speak only English for 60 minutes non-stop. Not only did he get to practice English in class, but also he did some Skype interviews every now and then to see if his English was good enough to get hired. After about 5 months of daily practice and a few interviews, he got a job in Europe. Yay! Want to know how? Simple. By using the story method. When he began learning English with me, Ilham was just a beginner, but after reading about 100 English storybooks in 5 months, his English proficiency reached an intermediate level and he almost never studied grammar rules. What? That's right. And you know what else? He's not the first person to have done it. Sanat, a university student, had learned English in about 6 months. After his teacher had disgraced him in front of a large group of students by saying that he could never learn English, he came to me and said, I must learn English as soon as possible to prove the teacher wrong. His motivation to learn was so strong that instead of taking a break from his studies just like everybody else does during summer break, he started learning English even though he had a full-time job. He would get up at 4 a.m. in the morning and read and listen to English stories until 8 a.m. and go to work. In the afternoon, he would come to class and tell me a story for 1 hour and then go home at 7 p.m. and learn new stories until midnight. When his studies began in September, he gave a PowerPoint presentation in English to the same teacher. As a result, he became and stayed her most favorite student until he graduated with the best grades in English without studying grammar, even though his final exam was grammar-based. Today, I just cannot get my students to stop speaking English thanks to the story method. To a teacher who loves teaching English, nothing is more rewarding than seeing his students enjoy speaking English naturally. And these students are not some gifted students with the best grades. Most of them are average students like you and me, which means anyone can do it. Here's how. The story method. Step 1. Set an achievable goal. Step 2. Translate a new chapter. Step 3. Occupy yourself with the chapter. Step 4. Retell, repeat, and record. Step 5. Yahoo! If you finish on time. Or yikes if you don't. Step 1. Set a goal. Imagine that you're on a plane and let's call it plane A. For some reason, you go and ask the pilot, "Excuse me, can you tell me where we're flying to?" And what the pilot says shocks the crap out of you. He calmly says, "I don't know, we're just flying around." You'd probably be scared to death because you know that sooner or later the plane is gonna run out of fuel and crash. This describes most language students. They are the pilot of the plane called My Language Learning Journey, and the fuel is their motivation. They don't know where they're going, what they need to do, and how much time it takes to get there. That's why they often lose their motivation and just give up before they achieve anything praiseworthy. Now imagine another plane called Plane B. When you ask the pilot where the plane is headed, he says, "We're taking the Route 72 to get to Miami, Florida in about 6 hours." In this case, you can just rest and relax because you know exactly where you're going, how, and when you'll get there. I think I don't even have to ask you which plane you'd like to be on, right? Anyway, the point is, you must have a clear goal of where you want to go, how, and when you can get there. Let me show you how to do just that by using the plane analogy. Where to intermediate level. When? In 6 months, more or less. How? By reading and listening to 72 books. Why intermediate level? Why not upper intermediate or advanced, you might ask? Well, in my opinion, once a language learner reaches an intermediate level, he should shift his focus from studying materials for the sake of language learning to learning the language through studying self-improvement materials to double the rewards. Look, if your girlfriend wants to go to the movies with you, you can't say to her, "Honey, can I tell you interesting stories instead? Because I don't know anything about money and that's why I don't have any to take you out." You know what I'm saying? No money, no honey, baby. If you'd ask me, what's made the biggest impact on your fluency? I'd say more than 100 self-improvement books such as How to Win Friends and Influence People, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, $100 Startup, Millionaire Fastlane. They're stories too, except they're true and you can learn life lessons from them. When you read them, you'll be learning English and life lessons at the same time. How cool is that? What's more, if you're intermediate, you can survive and then thrive in any English-speaking country. Why 72 books? Through many experiments like the ones I mentioned in the stories of my students, I learned that to move from one level to another, it takes about 15 to 20 books, storybooks, but you might ask, 72 divided by 6 equals 12, not 15 or 20. So again, why 12 books? The answer is to have a specific step-by-step routine that you can follow weekly in order to turn language learning into a lifelong habit such as washing your face or brushing your teeth. Why stories? What about grammar? Stories teach you more grammar than any grammar book does, and I've done some research on how much grammar stories can teach you, and you can find out about it in my video titled How to Learn English Grammar Through Stories. If you want to get to the bottom of the story method, watch The Best Kept Secret in Language Education before the video about my research. Okay, let's get back to our goal. If you are not a person who likes to read books, you might be thinking, "Oh my God, how can I read 72 books in 120 days when I don't even read a book a year?" Don't worry, your first 25 books will be 16 to 20 pages only, so it should be a piece of cake. However, if you are a very busy person, you may not be able to read one book every other day. If so, set a goal of reading 12 books in 100 days. I personally believe that starting small by reading only one book a week and sticking to it is much more effective than trying to read 10 books in 10 days and giving up halfway through. Therefore, I'll give you 4 different plans that you can choose from depending on your free time to study English. Here they are. Fun fact about Plan C. An average CEO in America reads about 2 to 3 books per week to stay at the top. You will be the CEO, aka the boss of language learning, if you can do the same. No matter which plan you choose, your how, your method, reading 72 books, will be the same, but you can change it too by reading less or more depending on how much English you already know. Okay, let's break our goal of reading 72 books in 6 months down to mini goals by looking at the books you'll be reading. I chose Penguin Readers because my students love their stories and I've been using their books for 10 years. You can find the link to download this list in the description section of this video or on my Telegram channel. Start with the easiest stories, even though your English is at pre-intermediate level or even higher, because when I talk to intermediate students, I notice that they make basic mistakes in their choice of grammar. They leave out the is or use the present verb tense while talking about the past. This is because they probably didn't spend enough time practicing English when they were beginners. Instead, they just moved on to elementary or pre-intermediate levels and ended up with gaps or big holes in their accuracy. Don't be like them. Remember what Bruce Lee said, "I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times." Practice the basics of the language. Read level 1, 2, 3 stories 10,000 times and you will be the English-speaking Bruce Lee. Step 2. Translate a chapter. The guy named Ilham who learned English in 5 months did 3 things every day. Reviewed all the decks on his Anki Droid, read and listened to stories. This is his Anki Droid. As you can see, the list of stories he read is different from the list that I showed you in step 1 because not long ago I realized that reading books by one publisher is a lot easier and more effective than reading books randomly. Here are the steps to translate a chapter. 1. Download Anki Droid. 2. Take a book according to the month and the level you're at. 3. Scan through the first chapter to see if you can find any new words. 4. Create a deck and name it by copying the title of the story you're reading. 5. Add all the new words to the deck with their translations in your native language. That's it! But if you don't know anything about Anki Droid and how it works, just Google it. But soon I'll make a detailed video about Anki Droid, so subscribe to the channel not to miss it. Step 3. Occupy yourself with the chapter. Here's how you can do that. 1. Review the new words in Anki Droid. 2. Read the chapter carefully. 3. Read and listen to the chapter at the same time. 4. Listen to the chapter 3 times or more to learn it deeply. Use net time, no extra time, to learn the chapter. When you're in a noisy place such as a subway train or a bus stop, you can review the new words on your Anki Droid, but when you're in a quiet place such as a bus, you can either read or listen to the story on your phone. For example, I listen to audiobooks on my way to work and back home every single day, and I'm not exaggerating. I've been doing this since 2015. Use your time wisely because your time is your life. Don't just play games or listen to songs or read Telegram posts to kill time. Learn English instead. Listening to songs is okay, but you should know your limit. My limit is 3 to 5 English songs a day. How to read books super fast. Recently, I did an interesting experiment with one of my upper intermediate students. At upper level, stories are really long and it's almost impossible to read one book every other day when it's 140 page long and has 2300 headwords. That's why I told my student to read and listen to one chapter 3 times by increasing the audio speed each time by 50%. He used an Android app called Music Speed Changer and read one chapter at 150% and then 200%, which is twice as fast as an average person can read. According to some studies, an average person can read 250 to 300 words per minute, but at 200% you can read 500 to 600 words per minute. That means you can finish a 2-hour book in 1 hour. How cool is that? So try reading stories twice as fast if you are upper intermediate or advanced, or if you're very busy. Let's try speed reading.
Chapter 1. A Lucky Man. Madison Square Garden, New York, November 30th, 1928. There were 19,000 boxing supporters around the center ring in Madison Square Garden, and most were waiting for just one thing, for one fighter to murder another. Tonight they were waiting for Gerald Tuffy Griffiths, the terror from out west, to destroy New Jersey's Jim Braddock. At the sound of the bell, Braddock stood under the hot lights and watched Griffiths rush out into the ring. Tuffy Griffiths had come to New York after winning 50 fights. He had won his last fight with a knockout in the first round. Everybody knew that he would do the same to Braddock. Everybody except Braddock and his manager, Joe Gould. Gould believed in Braddock.
It's not that hard to understand the text at 150s, is it? How about 200%?
Manager, Joe Gould. Gould believed in Braddock. A sudden jab from Braddock knocked Griffiths back. The fighters started moving around the ring, throwing and blocking punches. Griffiths threw the same punches that had easily beaten his other opponents, but Braddock stayed on his feet. Blood and sweat poured into his eyes. None of the reporters around the ring expected the New Jersey boxer to reach the end of the second round. But by round 2, Braddock had timed his opponent's rushes. Within 1 minute, he hit Griffiths with his big punch, his right cross, and Tuffy went down. The crowd stood, shouting. But the referee had only counted to 3 before Griffiths was back on his feet and the fight continued.
Still understandable, isn't it? I usually speed watch video tutorials on programming at 250% and I finish them really quickly and I can remember all the important points. So try speed reading, it's a lot of fun. Step 4. Retell, repeat, and record. Retell. Once you've gone through the chapter several times, try retelling it. Don't pay attention to your pronunciation yet, as it takes several years to improve it, unless you live in an English-speaking country. Just try to retell the chapter in your own words. You don't have to tell it exactly the way it is in the story, but try to include the new vocabulary words from the chapter. If you can, find a language partner on WhatsApp or Telegram and send him the first chapter retell and he can retell the second chapter, but if you don't have a partner, you can do it on your own, just like me. Repeat. After retelling the first chapter in your own words, go to the next chapter and take the steps 2 to 4 and do this with all the chapters until you finish the story completely. Then try to retell the whole story from start to finish in your own words. Record. I suggest that you take your phone and record your very first full story retell and every retell at the end of each level. You'll be amazed by how much progress you will have made when you listen to all the recordings after 6 months, and if you decide to share them with me, I'll make a video about you. Step 5. Yahoo! Or yikes! Yahoo! You need to give yourself some pleasure for finishing the stories by the deadline. If your weekly plan was to read 3 stories and you read them all and was able to retell them in your own words in 7 days, you deserve a reward for that because there is not a lot of people who are disciplined enough to do it. Anything that gives you pleasure can be a reward. For example, when I finish a big project such as this video, I either watch a full movie in English or do something fun to trick my brain into believing that whenever hard work is done, there is something fun waiting for me. If you have a language partner, you might want to go out somewhere together to celebrate completing all the stories for one level. Or your reward might be as simple as eating an apple for completing a single story. The healthier the reward, the better. Yikes! Tupac, the famous rapper, once said, "Fear is stronger than love." But I would rephrase that and say, pain is stronger than pleasure. If I told you that I would give you $700 for completing all 72 stories, you'd be motivated, but you'd still be either late or not complete the stories at all, because you know you won't lose anything if you don't meet the deadline. What if I said, give me $700 and if you don't complete all the stories in 6 months, you will never see your money ever again? I'm pretty sure you'd be extremely motivated to do everything in a timely fashion because who'd want to lose his hard-earned money? Here's what you can do. Give your friend who can speak English $10 and tell him that after 30 days you will give him 12 books and he can ask you 10 questions about each story and you should be able to answer at least 8 questions in English. If you can't answer 80% of the questions, he'll keep the money. How to put pain and pleasure together. Find a tutor and meet him every weekend to report your progress and do a story retell. A good tutor can ask you questions based on the story, correct your mistakes, help you learn more difficult grammatical structures, and compliment you when your story retell is really good. Since you'll have paid for the service, you'll be motivated to attend each meeting, and when you miss the meeting, you lose money. And you know what's cool about the story method? You can use it to learn any language, be it Chinese, Arabic, or Russian. You simply need to Google greatest stories in your target language and you'll get a list of books you can read with audio tracks to follow along. Final advice. Will Smith, a famous Hollywood actor, once said, "You don't set out to build a wall. You don't say, I'm gonna build the biggest, baddest, greatest wall that's ever been built. You don't start there. You say, I'm gonna lay this brick as perfectly as a brick can be laid. You do that every single day, and soon you have a wall." Rephrase for language learners. You don't set out to be fluent in the language. You don't say, I'm gonna be the greatest language learner with the highest IELTS score in the world. You don't start there. You say, I'm gonna learn this one story as perfectly as a story can be learned. You do that every single day, and soon your English will be beautiful like diamonds in the sky.